Hello, this is Benjamin Boyce. I am doing a pop-up live stream. Haven't done one of these in a while, I think. I can't remember the last one I did. I did promise somebody to update people on the Evergreen musical. I know the Evergreen story is a bit long in the tooth. We're coming up on the 6th anniversary of those infamous events that launched me into the internet. What's below the stratosphere? I don't think I'm in the stratosphere. I don't really know all my atmosphere levels. Somewhere in the middle sphere. Probably the hover sphere. If we have the dronosphere, the visible drone sphere. That's probably where I am. And so I wanted to update. But anyway, so I started the Evergreen musical, I guess a while ago. I kind of do a lot of things where I sing and come up with songs when I'm bored or I have idle time. And some of those songs were about the Evergreen situation because there's just such iconic lines and behaviors in the Evergreen situation. And one way to interpret the Evergreen situation is as a performance or kind of as a ritual, but a ritual performance of something. And that's made very explicit in the canoe meeting and then in the actual protest where the behaviors and the individuals that are involved in the protest kind of act in this very chanty way. I mean, there's the chants there too, right? Which are just hey, hey, ho, ho, right? Very rudimentary chants. No musicality in those chants at all. And so, when we get later on into the development of the Evergreen musical, I do try to play around with the chants and try to make some harmonies out of those chants. And while I'm doing all this, I'm learning how to do all this because I made a bunch of kids albums and show tunes just in my head and now adapting them into a long extended musical piece that's probably about, I don't know how long it's going to be, about an hour long. And the only way that I'm able to write it at this point in time is just to come up with songs after songs after songs. And so anyways, then I'll answer some questions. If you guys have any questions, I'm free. I'm here to chat with you. Let's do some sort of participatory, revelatory interaction here over this internet substrate. So anyways, I think it was 2020 or 2021, the fall of 2021, I started getting more and more musical ideas. I'm like, I should do a musical. And then I kept on, once I had the idea of doing a musical, I'm like, well, here's another song that I could do for the musical. Here's another song that I could do for the musical. But then I had this one song that I forgot about. And then I remembered, and it wasn't even a song. It's not even a song yet. It's just a couple of stanzas about how they treated the police officer, Stacy Brown. And it was just so catchy. Yeah, I'm going to have to pull it up. There's just all these different word plays. And I sent it to Stacy Brown, the police chief, because I thought it was funny and she thought it was funny. I'm like, oh, you know what? I really need to just do this thing. I need to do something creative. So it's the song for it. And so it's just the stanza. It's not even a song. The Evergreen protesters are yelling at her and they go, "Look at this woman. She isn't human. She's just a piece of bacon with a gun on her hip. Imagine their nerve defending the white man, macing us and tasing us for giving him lip." And then Stacy goes, "I didn't tase you, but you would have though. Every 22 hours, one of your pig bros executes another man whose only sin is to be American, born in the wrong skin, wrong skin, wrong skin, wrong skin. All cops are bastards, thugs of slave masters, enforcers of the genocides of all non-whites." That's all I have right now. So that's when I launched in earnest. And then I spent December of 2021 and then the early months of 2022 dedicated with Gracie, Lonely White Iris, I believe she is, on this program. Actually getting all the music down, and she was acting as my collaborator / composer. So I'd come up with the songs and then she'd help me with the actual music. And then we'd put together accompaniment with it. And she sang some and I sang some. And so we have like a basket of songs. And then I kind of just got tired of doing that because it is kind of exhausting work. And I need a lot of free time that I'm just idling my brain to go over and over and over and over and over again these songs, because the way that you have to do it for me is just, you get the form of the song and then you have to fill it up with all these different words. And then as you progress further through the musical, you need to fit certain pieces into certain places. So it becomes more and more narrow. Like when you begin on a project, it's really, really open and free. But as you progress with the project and it starts to take form, you actually have to concentrate on getting the right pieces in the right places and then tying them all together. It becomes more and more complex. And then on top of that, you want to not repeat yourself, which is kind of difficult because this is all basically just intersectionality. And the intersectionalists, the woke progressives, they repeat themselves over and over and over again. And there's only so many phrases that they have. And you can exhaust that. And then if you exhaust that too much, or if you repeat too much, then it just numbs the mind to it. So you have to, I had to take some breaks, to come at it afresh, to think of new songs, new phrases, new formulas, and then new word plays. And so over the last month and a half, since mid-December, I've been, I guess 2.5 months now, I've been getting back into it. And I wanted to give you guys an update, maybe sing a song or two. But before I do, I will get to some questions. Bobby Broadway asks, were you here before the Evergreen stuff? That's how I found you. Were I here? Was I here? Was I here before the Evergreen stuff? I had a couple of videos that I produced while at Evergreen that were very just poetry videos, very geeky poetry videos. They are still on my channel, but I believe I made them either private or unlisted because they're completely not related to what I'm doing now. And Katie asks, an ensemble, it will have to be, I don't know how many people I don't know how many people will need to be in the final project, but I'm thinking probably around 20 people, because there's a chorus and there's several characters. Somebody else asked if Brett and Heather are in the musical. I don't have any spots for Heather. It's going to take place basically at the canoe meeting, which is probably going to end up being the canoe / the day of absence meeting collapsed into one, because I have the canoe meeting. I basically have the entire opening act. I think it's about 20, 25 minutes, all songs. There's a couple little pieces that I need to put in together. That's all the canoe meeting, which is the professors riling themselves up and riling the students up with this woke ideology, this woke intersectional ideology, and the mission statement of equity. And then Chet Einstein at the end of that kind of makes a complaint and says we need to slow down, hold your horses there. We need to think these things through. Social engineering isn't something that you just do without terrible consequences if you don't actually think all this through. And then he gets some backlash. And then that's act one. And then the second act, I don't know exactly how to do it, but there is a Day of Absence song that I really like. I feel bad just singing the songs out loud here because I'm not a good singer, and it's kind of like weird to go back and forth between songs and exploring the songs or explaining the whole thing, but it's a good song. It goes, and I don't know. So, you have the idea for the song, but then you work with a composer or you work with musicians to actually flesh it out and see how will this be performed. And then you have to think of stage directions and you have to think of this, that, and the other thing. But the Day of Absence song, I can't not do a Day of Absence, but I might have to do an interlude where there's a tiny little Day of Absence, and then the students break up, and then the students have a fight. So you have a Jamil-like character who is this sultry femboy, and he has this sultry femboy ballad song about nobody's ever paying him attention and how he lives for attention. And so he goes online seeking attention, and he starts to make more and more incendiary phrases. And that's how this spark goes off. Because then there's this other character, this troll character that's kind of me, Nolan, Lies, and Keave Duiva. And I don't know if you guys know the Evergreen story or not, but these kind of three characters start to play around with this woke ideology and say, well, look at how ridiculous this is, and look at how fragile these people are, so let's play with them. And then that cascades into the protest. So there's going to be that little day of absence interlude, and then the students get into a fight. It spills over into the police. The police kind of do a police report, so I have to do a scene where the troll character and the Jamil character go to the police department, and then there's another song, and then from there the protest starts happening, and they go directly to the Chet Einstein's class. And I have most of the beginning of the protest, which is this epic song. It actually fits all together. I'm really proud of this one. It all fits together. And, and then the students go from there, and then they take over the whole campus. And then basically the rest of the musical is this huge protest where they're singing all their protest songs. And the admin and Chet Einstein are trying to respond to that. And then the teachers are trying to respond for or against the student protesters. And then I think at this point I was going to there was one more scene that I wanted where they all kind of go out. Like after this big explosion, this big musical fest, this musical struggle session occurs, then they kind of go and they eat lunch and night falls and it's dark. And then there's this kind of another interlude where you have all these kind of groups like wandering around like with bats and like with chalk, and there is some sort of final confrontation. So it's kind of hard for me still to visualize how it kind of comes together into this climax. But it should end there. I think it's sufficient for the musical, at least, not the entire Evergreen story, to just end at this climax. Because what we want to just basically present to somebody who doesn't know about the Evergreen State College story or care about the Evergreen State College story, we want to present them basically the 2020 Black Lives Matter protest done at a college. So basically it's the Evergreen musical, but it maps onto the 2020 Black Lives Matter protest. So it is kind of salient beyond the reach of the particulars of the story. And so we don't need to go into all of the particulars of the story. We just need to wrap it up somehow. Yeah. So we're like, okay, maybe you shouldn't share them. Ian, yeah, is it Ian? Sorry, Ian, whoa, what happened? I'm sorry about that. Ian, there's no, this is sans serif font, so I don't know if it's Ian or it's got to be Ian. Thank you. Hello, Mr. Boyce. I really appreciate your channel. Have you thought of interviewing Ryan Chapman? He has a YouTube. You should look him up. That name sounds familiar. So I'm always open for suggestions. I think I know who you're talking about. And I think we follow each other on the Twitter. And he does videos, I believe, explaining, I think he did a video about fascism. I think this is the guy who does these nice little video essays and stuff. So I'm not terribly exposed to him, but I will take that under consideration. And I'm sure that he wouldn't mind the exposure that I can provide him. Simfempem says, Terry Gilliam would really appreciate this, I think. I was thinking maybe possibly we can get the people who do South Park. I know Matt Stone is one of them. I can't remember the other guy's name. It's at the tip of my tongue. I can't remember it because they already do musicals and stuff. So it might like overlap with what their stuff is, but they might, produce it for me or something like that. Helen asks about cafeteria scenes. So the thing is that there's plenty of material, but I just need to get all these different songs in a row and then publish it. So a lot of stuff's going to be kept out of it. I can't do a song about everything. That just is going to take forever. It just takes a long time to do these things. So I just finished one that just kind of came to me. It started. I'll kind of sing one. I haven't practiced enough to not completely butcher it. And it's within my register. And this one took about a week, but I had to go over and over and over and over and over again. And this one's really tight with the wordplay. So I'll try to sing it. It's kind of short too. And I don't know where to place this. I think this is going to be in the where the students are protesting everybody at that 4300 library building one. And it goes, No one ever wonders how black folk feel, always represented in the annals of our nation as the lowest of the low, but we will not yield. The loss of our humanity, forsake a whitey's vanity, and history's calamity is climaxing in our insurgency, and every minute we wait to escape the Western culture that perpetuates hate on our race, to make us suffer at the hands of the state for our fates to be the other. But the jig is up, we've had enough. We're gonna bust the nut of justice up the buttocks of who thrust us into ships where chains and whips enforced on our subservience. And now here we are, look how far oppression's driven us out of our classes to clash with who denigrated us with vile entitlement, violating our environment, and violent intentions hidden in bioessentialism, leading to nothing less than lynch until we implement the vision of intersectionalism, and then everyone will know how the black folk feel. So I'll go through that. I'll do a little mini analysis. I might be able to put it on the screen. I'm not going to dick around with putting it on the screen. So this one I feel kind of bad about, because it is kind of it feels bad for me to make this, but these are definitely the sentiments that are seeded into black activism. Not all of it, but the woke black activism and the stuff that they expressed at Evergreen and during the protests, they definitely summon this history of slavery. They really base their present action on past wrongs. They really dig into that. Their anchor for the entire movement is 400-year-old history, 200-year-old history, 50-year-old history, but it's not necessarily in the present. Right. And so that's why there's such a clash. And that's furthermore why their anger has no limit, because there's nothing present that has anything resembling actual slavery going on here. They are very entitled. They are basically taking out loans to be little queens and princes on this campus. They're handed the world, right? And they're given every opportunity, and actually more than every opportunity. If you look into the way that civil rights law has grown and spread and continually gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and now is not just demanding affirmative action reparations, but actually demanding moral reparations from the white people. Like, the white people need to continually be paying for all of these different sins. So I've been watching Django Unchained and trying to hold in mind that reality of slavery is really real and really grotesque and vile stuff. And in the American mythology, in order for that to be broken down and still respected, I don't want to completely do a parody, right? I don't want this to be a complete desecration of the history of the United States, but actually to parody the people who are disrespecting it, to use it to gain very petty personal power, pogroms, or to gain instantaneous power that they don't necessarily deserve. Like, they're using all this history that they didn't directly experience themselves in order to gain power. And so I think that they're disrespecting that history, and not all black people, just the Evergreen protesters and other sorts of woke activists are disrespecting this history and are basically manipulating people by summoning this history and then blaming it and pegging it on the people that are right in front of them. So no one ever wonders how black folk feel. So complete victim frame. You don't know anything about us. You don't think about us. You don't wonder about us. Always represented in the annals of our nation as the lowest of the low, but we will not yield. The loss of our humanity, for sake of whitey's vanity. So there's a little bit of that racism going on in there. And history's calamity is climaxing in our insurgency, which is basically what it is. Like, this social justice movement is summoning all of that rage, all of that pain in order to do something really right now, to bring it to a climax, to have a climax. And the tragedy or the comedy of it is that, you know, when they're asked what they really want or what really actually happened to them, they can't really answer that. They just want power. They just want prestige, power, status. That's all that they want right now, right here. So they're summoning all that in order to bolster their demands. And every minute we wait to escape the Western culture, and that is directly in reference to, what's his name? Al Sharpton? I think it's Al Sharpton's Hey, Hey, Ho, Ho. Western culture has got to go. I think that was one of the first Hey, Hey, Ho, Ho's. Is it Al Sharpton? Or another guy? Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton? One of those guys. Hey, Hey, Ho, Ho. Western culture's got to go. So that's basically, it's part of this post-civil rights or the extension of civil rights activism to say that the project isn't equity. It's not equality, it's equity. And it's not even equity as in we want more, but we want you to have less. It's not even that we want more than you. We want you to actually have less. We want Western culture to go. So that's a direct reference. Every minute we wait to escape the Western culture that perpetuates hate on our race to make us suffer at the hands of the state for our fates to be the other. That's a little bit of postmodern jargon there, or critical theory jargon. But the jig is up. This is the best line. The jig is up. We've had enough. We're gonna bust the nut of justice up the buttocks of who thrust us into ships where chains and whips enforced on us subservience. And now, and this kind of wraps up like what I'm trying to say with the parody. Well, trying to anchor the parody, not just, I don't want to do unto them as they were trying to do unto Western culture. I want to put them in their place. I want to rationally parody them, right? By putting things in perspective, ratio, rationality. And now here we are. Look how far oppression's driven us. Out of our classes to clash with, that's a good rhyme, out of our classes to clash with who denigrated us. So oppression's driven them out of the classes. Oppression's actually driven them out of what reparations had given them. So the end of oppression is to give them a leg up, is to invite them on campus, give them plenty of loans and as much grants as possible, and to be as lenient as possible with the grading and as ameliorative of their needs as possible. And even still then, oppression drives them away from the gift that they're given to clash with, out of our classes to clash with who denigrated us, with what? And this goes back to their suit against Brett, which is just this kind of this witch that they made out of him, this goblin or demon that they made out of him as this entitled scientist, right? Who denigrated us with vile entitlement, violating our environment, and violent intentions hidden in bioessentialism, leading to nothing less than lynch until we implement the vision of intersectionalism. When I sang that in this, I didn't do the timing right with intersectionalism. And then everyone will know how the black folk feel. Right. So the narrative of being oppressed, the only logical outcome, because they deny all the reparations that they're given, the only possible outcome is to make a victim of everybody else. And then everybody will know how the black folk feel. So there is another song that's actually really good. I don't know how to turn it into music. I mean, I have the song, but I don't know how to turn it into music. It goes, how's it go? Oh yeah, it's really funny. So after they're protesting Brett, there's that huge song. It's going to be great. And then the police come and then they run away from the police and they're like, oh no, we're getting maced. And they're not getting maced. And then they go like, what are we going to do? What do we want to do? What do we want to do? And then they sing, we want a race war, a race war. We're gonna watch the bodies of the privileged hit the floor. In a race war, a race war. We're divvying identity and giving it a score. 2, 3, 4. Negative for the whites who thought that civil rights would lead to a world where they didn't have to fight for all the things that they stole from the people and the soil, from the culture to the gold. But the time is at a close. Yes, their time is drawing closed. And we're coming out in droves. Demanding what is owed. Or else a race war, a race war. We're gonna watch the bodies of the privileged hit the floor. And a race war, a race war. We're divvying identity and giving it a score. And that song is cool because they want a race war. And so the white people are on the bottom and then black people are on the top. There's a verse about the black people and how like everything was built on the backs of the black people. And then they address all the other races, like the Asians, the Latinx and the Jews and the Asian people too. It's time you got to choose between licking Whitey's boots or joining in this war and even in the score. Let the bodies hit the floor because we're not taking this anymore. It's so bad. It's so bad. It feels so offensive and wrong to turn this acid of critical theory into jubilation. I mean, I guess that's where the dramatic the dramatic tension comes from, because the songs are just so like happy and jubilant. Like I'm inserting the joy and the art into what they didn't. Into what they said, but they didn't produce it with joy or art. It was all about rage and anger. It wasn't even sorrow. I mean, it's sad to look at. It's pathetic, but it's not like the only, because the emotions were just so turned up. It was just pure rage. And even the rage was hollow, right? Somebody mentioned earlier when after they protest, they go to the cafeteria and then they berate a minimum wage worker for not giving them pizza because they're malnourished and it's against state law for them to be denied food because they came in because they had other things to do than to show up during mealtime, and now they need to get their money. They need to get what they're paid for in the future, right? I forgot the thread of that, but that entitlement and just having that. Okay, so they're so angry. Like, well, what are you angry about? What do you want? And they're like, okay, well, we'll give you food. Like, no, that's not even enough. We don't even want food. We want you to call the military base. One of the protesters said this. I want you to call the military base, which is 90 minutes away, 60 minutes away, and have the military escort us across campus. She wanted the military to escort them like 500, 400 yards across campus, even though they hate the police and they hate they hate America. They want to destroy America, but they hate the cops, but they want protection at the same time. Protection from whom? Right. And so earlier today on Twitter, somebody started, there was an argument about, there was a kind of a slanderous thread about me and Brett, about how we lied about the whole Evergreen story. And they were jumbling all of the entire chronology in order to say that everything that the students did was based on Tucker Carlson and the hate that Tucker Carlson put upon Evergreen. But that didn't happen until after the protest was basically done. There's only a couple hours of footage that is captured after Tucker Carlson, right? So all of that hysteria and I want to say hysterectomy, but that's the wrong word. Histrionics happened before the Tucker Carlson, and that's what Evergreen State College tried to do and the faculty tried to do. But it's pin it on Brett, pin it on Tucker, and then confuse the whole narrative by putting all of the action as a reaction to something that was a reaction to their action, right? Which is something James Lindsay was just talking about. The whole one of the main purposes for woke, or one of the main tactics of woke activism is to get a reaction, right? The reaction is the action. But in a case like Evergreen, where none of it was actually substantiated, I mean, their behavior was substantiated, but it wasn't based on anything that I could find. And none of the protesters in the ensuing years have come up and confronted me and saying, no, this is what actually happened. This is what actually happened. It wasn't just a Facebook argument, but we actually have raw evidence that we were abused, ridiculed, or harassed somehow on campus, but there was no proof as far as I know. And I went through the police records and stuff. So they didn't record the whole thing, but they want to, but because it's not based on anything, they have to base it on something. So they base it on the reaction to themselves. They say their action was caused by the reaction to their action. So it doesn't actually make any sense. So it's either history, it's either the entirety of history or what happens after they do things. Anyways, the reaction is the action. Mirror Jumezois asks, was there a sizable Jewish community at Evergreen? No, I mean, there's probably an overrepresentation of Jewish people in the faculty, which is just kind of par for the course for academia. Jewish people invest a lot of time into academics and get ahead in that, and also tends to be a preponderance of Jewish academics in the progressive fields. For whatever reason, I'm not making a racial statement. It's just that's the way it is, and I don't want to get into that conversation, so I probably shouldn't open that. Schmuckmuck says, makes me think of Hakuna Matata. Simulacrum says, YouTube algo is broken. It shows me all of Boyce's detrans videos. It doesn't show you. It's broken because that's all you see. Is D-Trans? Well, watch the D-Trans stuff, because the D-Trans stuff is usually the advertisers that are paying for that D-Trans stuff are usually people who are peddling cross-sex hormones. So you watch the D-Trans video, you see the cross-sex hormone advertisement, and then you click on that advertisement so that their ad revenue is spent on my videos rather than other videos. I probably shouldn't get into that. Is that messing around? That's probably some sort of violation of, I could probably get in trouble with that. I probably shouldn't mess around with the advertisers. So just forget I said anything. Dave L says, I'm giving them way too much credit. Having watched hours of your Evergreen coverage, they were insane. This event at the most liberal college in the country was so stupid. Well, okay. My job is to give people much more credit. My job is to be as generous with credit as possible, is to basically to give people as much rope as possible, and to trust that their argument or their waywardness or their direction will bear out what happens with that rope, and how that rope either ensnares them or drags them to safety, right? But my job is not to judge. It's to allow for something to happen. Russian guy. I want my $5 million too, moving to San Francisco. Okay. Yeah, I guess San Francisco is giving out money to people because they have so much of it. I don't know. As Scoville 7 says, I pin it on the Orange Man. Yes, the Orange Man. So I was sad. I was worried about the Evergreen musical being irrelevant, because so much of the Evergreen situation is based on a reaction to Trump, and it features large in Trump is continually brought up in the musical. There's actually one song that I could publish that's actually pretty close to being a good demo. Gracie sings it, where they call out Trump specifically. Why y'all believe? Okay, yeah, so it's this, I believe. Scariest? Fine. Here, let me read those lyrics. Scariest. Yeah. Yeah, okay, so yeah. So in the canoe meeting, Miasma Lowe stands up and calls out all the white folk, because they're all like, we want to get on board with this equity thing, and we believe in this equity thing. And she says, why would I believe? You're all signaling. Are you really being woke or just blowing smoke to get high on your empathy? Why should I believe our community, white habits will overthrow and implode the status quo to give the racialized some reprieve? Because as faculty of color have been watching, and this is pretty much verbatim of what she says in the protest, because as faculty of color have been watching for decades to progressive pandering, but when the chips are down and time is ripe for acting, y'all hide behind your pale-faced gentility. And thanks to you, this is basically verbatim, thanks to you, we've got the crassest, racist, sexist, psychopathic, orangist, hawkish, chauvinistic, fascist, classist, capitalistic, queer, xeno, trans, and homophobic president-elect y'all white folk voted in, who is the scariest scared of everything, nightmare epitome of the American dream, the embodiment of everything you believe we'd be free of, with enough meetings like these, speaking endlessly of feelings, but I don't believe we'll ever see true equity till all your white lives are in as much jeopardy as the black people who are killed every 28 minutes by a cop or some fool who thinks he can be. Every 28. And this is totally verbatim from a speech she gave. Despite the persistent efforts of many white people, including so-called allies, to turn the conversation about race away from a conversation about black life, away from a conversation about police brutality, and away from a conversation about the white supremacy that lives and breathes within every single white person standing here right now, I refuse to shut my mouth and let white people set this agenda. Everybody claps. And if what I'm saying right now, this is total verbatim, if what I'm saying right now pisses you off or makes you feel targeted and defensive, good. Use that anger and energy to help yourselves understand your own complicity in the oppression of the very same people you claim to feel proud of. And for the love of Black Jesus, can we please think of the people who are prone to sensory overload and stop clapping? And that's when everybody stops clapping and starts snapping. And that last part I put in there. So Trump is brought up several times. And so I was worried that Trump being not elected would kind of fade into irrelevance, but that has been the opposite of the case. Like the only way that the Uniparty can survive is by making him the biggest poof of a threat possible, because they need that leverage in order to be viable, because they're so shitty. Like, we live under such a shitty government right now that they have to create an absolute monster out of kind of a marginal statesman or businessman in order to maintain their grip on the narrative. And I'm not going to speak about the J6 footage. I'm not going through all that, but when that thing first happened, January 6th first happened, I'm like, okay, this is pure narrative. And specifically going from Evergreen to January 6th, I'm like, there's going to be thousands of hours of footage here, and any given story is going to be viable. And it's not going to be about what actually happens. It's going to be about what people say actually happened. And so no matter what we're going to do, we're only ever going to see a narrative, which is true with my Evergreen stuff. So I try to be as round as possible, but there's huge chunks of it missing. I don't have any deep interviews with any of the protesters, any of the main agitators. I don't have any deep interviews, debriefing interviews with any of the protest faculty admin and the faculty admin and workers there. And the workers really weren't pro there. They're just minimum wage workers who were being abused. The protesters actually cornered a mentally challenged janitor in the bathroom and yelled at her to be anti-racist and to get in the line. She panicked and fled. They were terrible. So yeah, I'd be generous in that I say what they actually did. So even the story that I present with Evergreen it's still a narrative. It's still pretty much pro-Brett, and try to fill out the story from an anti-woke perspective. Like, definitely that's how I became anti-woke, is by looking at this footage and then tying it together into what seemed to me a coherent narrative. But even my narrative, as generous as possible, is very partial. And so anything that happens at January 6th is going to be produced by the people who own that footage, which would be the people nominally, but in actuality, it's the deep state or whoever controls those cameras. The January 6th committee, that show trial, that kangaroo court, and this is totally my bias. Like, I don't trust those people at all to give us a full account, to really be balanced in their coverage, and I don't trust Tucker to be necessarily balanced. Tucker is able to be more balanced than January 6th, but it's going to be a total mess. It's going to be a total mess. If you look at what happened with the Twitter files today, Matt Taibbi and Schellermacher protested, and I haven't watched that footage, but that the deep state will do everything in their power to discredit anything that discredits them. And you can see that in all the clips. And then it's just so weird that these lefty wonks on Twitter, like, they're so pro censorship. They're running cover for the deep state. And you're like, okay, well, I hope your audience knows this, but it's like, it's not even that people are running cover for the deep state. It looks like people want to run cover for the deep state, who would nominally be anti-authoritarian in, a Bush regime or in a Trump regime, but they're totally running cover for the state. But you don't know if that's fake or not. It's really, really difficult to take any of the stuff, like on a national federal level, for me, terribly serious, because it's all fog of war. It's all fog of war. It's a hyper extension of the investment of what actually matters to me. It should only matter a little bit to me what happens at that level, because it only takes about 20% of my income. So I should only give it 20% of my caring, but I don't even want to give it that. I don't want it to possess me, but I do bring it up because you can see, like, I can concentrate on Evergreen and do what I can to develop storytelling techniques, and then do the meta narrative on the story techniques so that other people can be a little bit more conscious about what's going on in the propaganda sphere. And everything that's happening on a federal level is propaganda. Everything is filtered through intentions. Everything. So in a sense, you need to apply a critical hermeneutic, a hermeneutic of suspicion. You need to apply just a little bit of drop of that critical theory in order to erode the narrative. You need to be a little bit postmodern, because we are bombarded by these titanic narratives that don't ultimately give a shit about us or really benefit us in a human way. Like, does anybody get joy, mirth, find beauty, goodness, or truth in politics? I mean, how many people actually do that? Is it possible to do that? And insofar as it is possible, how do we approach politics in a way that we are aiming towards the good, the beautiful, and the true? Basically, you can probably try to make things good through politics, but even then you want to break away the politics off of the thing. And there's another thing that I could talk about the Daily Wire is making a certain rhetorical moves towards transgenderism. Matt Walsh is one, and Michael Knowles is another. And Michael Knowles at CPAC last weekend said that we need to, and this is his words, we need to eradicate transgenderism from public life, or from the public. And of course, as soon as he said that, that was snipped out and then reposted that he wants to eradicate trans people when he said transgenderism. And so that statement is inherently built to be taken advantage of. It's built for hysterics to happen around it. And we know that the transgender activists, the radical transgender activists, are incredibly histrionic, incredibly hysterical. And you can see that in how they approach J.K. Rowling, which J.K. Rowling has made some very anodyne statements that are pro-woman, not anti-trans, but even just being pro-woman and not being anti-trans has driven the trans rights activists in a complete frenzy. They want to destroy her. They loathe her, right? And they have no end of hate for her. So Michael Knowles comes up there and says, I want to eradicate transgenderism. So he makes a direct threat. So what else is going to do? Then the hysterics are going to be made even more manifest in this entire thing. So that's the political level. That's the wave pool of just like this big splashy wave pool. I think it's rather shallow and it's short-sighted. And I say that not to say I want to eradicate that sort of rhetoric, but that rhetoric will have a certain result at a certain level. And maybe that level is the level that will trickle into policy, into some sort of federal policy or state policy. But that's not actually going to convince anybody, person to person, who's wrestling with gender dysphoria or who's wrestling with autism or any given number of mental problems, that is seeking help through gender. That phrase, let's eradicate transgenderism from the public conversation, is not going to help anybody who's obsessed with gender. It's actually going to drive them further away from critically examining how gender might or might not be helping them. So I don't think that level of discourse is beneficial in the long run. I think that SEGM and GenSpect and organizations that are taking a humane, balanced approach they have a longer reach. Now, maybe those people will not have an effect on policy. So maybe they can only generally, gradually affect the professional level and then the psychological level. But do we want psychology and medicine dictated by the state, by politicians, by rhetoric of the sort where we're going to eradicate each other over this stuff? Like, do we want a rational, mediated, evidence, science-based, patient sort of view of things to come to the truth in that level? So does that rhetoric that Daily Wire is indulging in for political gain necessarily what is going to fix the problem? Is eradicating transgenderism from the conversation going to eradicate transgenderism from the public conversation? It's not. Transgenderism is not going to be eradicated by a direct assault. Now, there is the James Lindsay way. The James Lindsay framework is to really deeply, critically examine the ideas themselves. And he's pugilistic on Twitter for sure, but his body of work is to criticize the ideas on an intellectual and theoretical level. And that stuff I think is really important and actually useful for people who are already on the path of criticizing transgenderism, critical theory of all stripes, right? But does that necessarily convince people to get on board of critical theory. Like there has to be some sort of on-ramp to James's work. There has to be a rhetorical on-ramp to James's work for people to use that to convert themselves. Nobody's going to be converted by that because they're already blinded by a narrative that supersedes the rational argument. But I trust James's stuff. I trust James as a wise person, absolutely, and he's a good friend of mine at this point. But he's not necessarily going to convert anybody. That's going to be something that's going to be used for somebody who's already willing to be converted. What's going to convert people is real life experience. I think that my work and the work that Jen Specht is doing and Sagem and other human level stuff, providing space for detransitioners, providing space for mothers, for wives, for husbands. I don't like the trans widow thing. We can get into that. I don't not like the trans widow, quote unquote, topic as a topic. I just don't think that it's proper for me to necessarily venture into that. And I did publish an interview with a trans widow. That was actually an 1.5 hour long interview. And I only used the last half hour of that when we just stumbled into the trans widow topic. We were talking about conservatism. We were talking about her activism as a conservative. And then we kind of went into the transgender topic with how it has affected her. And I thought that we didn't set it up to do that, but that's what it became. And so I cut off the first part because it would have, one, it's too long. I wanted to just get to the trans widow stuff. And two, her conservative bias, her conservative framework would have turned off a lot of people. So I just wanted to get that out of the way because I wanted to remove actually the politics from that so she could just tell her personal story, right? So part of my work is to separate the political from the personal. So while I do have a criticism or a distaste for certain political maneuvers and criticism of Knowles and Walsh and their tact, I have a criticism because their work is different than my work, right? They're working and operating in a different domain than I am, and I have no desire to work in their domain. So I just see that their tools are not good for me, and I do wonder to what extent their tools are going to be beneficial. And I'm sure that some people in the comments or right now have a different opinion. I totally respect if you think that they're doing right and it's right for them to take an absolute hard line to eradicate an idea from public conversation, if that is even possible. I don't think that's possible. I don't think that that's fruitful. But your mileage may vary, and maybe more people going along that world. If you do look at the clip, Michael Knowles does say more than just eradicate that. He says that it can't be true. If it's not true, it's not true. If it's not true that a man can become a woman, then it's not true that a boy can become a girl. It's just not true. And so this is totally false. And so that statement of truth, I don't see how you get around that once you come to that position. But how do you get to that position? How do you move somebody to that position? By saying, I'm going to eradicate your ideas? You have to, I'm going to eradicate you is not the way to lead people to the truth, right? It's a preaching to the choir. It's war talk. And war works, kind of. Is it good? Have we had enough of it? Can be open to that. On that note, I do have an interview with this really great guy. His name is Lomez. He's a dissident, he's in the right dissident Twitterverse. So this is an extension of my right-winging it interview series. And he just published, I can show it to you. I don't know if he wants me to show this to anybody, but I'm going to show it to him anyways, because he decided one day that he's tired of people just bitching on the internet. He wants to incentivize artists and art from the dissident sphere. He wants to incentivize voices that are being shunned by the mainstream to have a place to speak. And so he got together about $10,000, and then he raised a bunch of funds by selling these books. He sold hard copies of these, I think only 250 or 500 or something, hard copies of these for $400 a piece. And then he sold about 200 or 400 or whatever of these for about $80 a piece. So they're pretty expensive, but the money goes into the next prize, right? So it's kind of an investment. And he's not going to digitize this at all, but it's absolutely beautiful. And he sold out. So I have a very rare copy, and the stories are great. There's fiction. There's a lot of just great art. It's just beautiful. It's just a beautiful artifact that they've come up with. He's got judges and stuff, and they're going to do one of these every month. They're going to come out with another one in a few months, and then do this once a year. And then he's going to publish a lot of other dissident writers and thinkers. And he's actually looking for funding for actually serious funding to do this, because there's a lot of interest in this, but it's really expensive. He really wants to create really high quality work. So it's not cheap work. It can't scale without like some serious investment. So I hope he gets some investment. I had him on the channel yesterday. I'm going to publish it tomorrow or maybe Saturday, now that I did this live stream, because I have to stagger my content because I'm going to run out of content any day now. Only the fact is that I run out of content, and then somehow my month fills up with a bunch of different interviews. But he's actually a great guy. We have a lot of similar background, grew up in California. So we just kind of rap about politics and art and culture, and kind of come down to the same kind of basic position that, yeah, the politicians are going to politic, but I guess what Brett Bart said, the guy who founded Brett Bart News, I don't know his first name, Brett Bart said that politics is downstream culture. And politics is downstream culture. That's a phrase that you can turn around, but insofar as nobody's creating a Rolling Stones for the dissident, for the new wave, there's no cultural magnate or magnet for the dissidents of any given stripe to congregate around, because the blob has swallowed every cultural institution, and we can war and take over colleges and do all this stuff. But without that creative component, without that cultural component, I think you're not going to have a lot of, that's the stuff that remains. That generating the creative content is where the new ideas come, that then later on people congregate, that then eventually filter up into some sort of politic or some sort of polity, some sort of collective consciousness. But you need that generative space, and you need a kind of a safe space for that generation. And so we do also talk about his stance on anonymity, and a lot of anons are in this because they are playing around with stuff you shouldn't say. I mean, it doesn't look evil by any means, but they're really like going at the jugular of a lot of like the sacred cows of nowadays, the stuff that you can't say, the topics that you can't breach. And there's a lot of beautiful stories in there. So if you can get a copy of the Passage Prize, or you look up Passage Publishing and maybe buy one of their books, you're not going to be disappointed. They're coming out with Curtis Yarvin's, a published edited version of Curtis Yarvin's first blog, Unqualified Reservations, which is a brilliant blog, whether or not you agree with Curtis, and I've had him on a couple times. His writing style and the ideas that he's playing around with, agree or disagree, there's just something incendiary and delightful. It's very Mephistophelian, the way that he just kind of completely demolishes like the assumptions of liberal democracy. And whether or not you want to keep liberal democracy, he mounts, I mean, according to the rules of liberal democracy, until you know your opponent's view, you don't know your own. And so it's actually very important to have enemies of liberal democracy in order to understand liberal democracy and make liberal democracy better. And Curtis is probably one of the funnier, more entertaining, modern tech bro perspectives on that. And that I love talking to him. I love listening to him. I know people have different views or attitudes towards his speaking style and to his opinions too. But I think he's just an important intellectual, important voice. And actually you can see his impact you can see that his impact is actually informing a lot of the dissident, right? So his stuff that he did like in 2007 is actually kind of fomenting, and people have been digesting that for a while. And you can see a lot of his ideas kind of percolating up through the consciousness that might eventually form some sort of synthesis with liberal democracy in order to figure out the elite problem that we have with our elites right now, that they're just crusty. We're living our aristocrats are crusty. I'm not an anti-elitist. I am actually, as an artist, I have to be an elitist. Like, there's no way to be a good artist without believing in elite art, believing in mastership, believing in some form of genius. Now, whether or not to what extent you romanticize that, okay, you can romanticize genius, or you can not romanticize genius, but I don't think that you can get anywhere without respecting genius, and whatever genius means. I mean, just excellence, some sort of elitism. So on an aesthetic level, I love the best tasting steak. I love the best tasting beer, the best tasting wine, the best phrase sonnet. I love the best of the best. And so inherently that would trickle out into who I would want, ruling over me would be the best statesman, the best of the best. And the fact of the matter is that we have the worst of the worst, probably not the worst of the worst, but pretty damn shitty elites right now. And so any given method of deconstructing that, or maybe James Lindsay would say, decoupling the elites from liberal democracy. You know, a lot of people are blaming democratic liberalism or liberal democracy on blaming our rulers on liberal democracy, blaming the downfall of civilization on liberalism. And I like to really think through those lines of argument, but ultimately I do want to preserve pluralism. I want to preserve the open exchange of ideas. I want to, at the same time, preserve or resurrect social opprobrium. I want to erect some form of shame. I don't want to live in a shameless society. I don't think that that's good. And so trying to decouple the crusty elites, the liberal libertines from liberalism and see what we can salvage is a part of the whole project. And so generating ideas, burning some sacred cows, even up to and including, free speech. I mean, there's one argument that Curtis said about free speech where somebody's like, well, somebody proposed, well, what do you think about right-wingers being so censored? And he kind of shrugged and he said, it's actually good for right-wingers to have that evolutionary pressure of being extinguished. Like that pressure, a little bit of that censorious pressure is actually good. It can, like to make kind of a crucible where the ideas can really foment and stuff. So in a certain respect, you could even say that censorship does have a good side. You know, do you want it? No, I don't want it. And then there's downstream effects of censorship where everybody has to start making a code where they're saying things that they don't mean that align with the mantras that you have to say. Like, and we're going to see this in the next 10 years because the diversity, equity, and inclusion ideology, like I said, like it's not really creative. It's just a bunch of NPCs repeating themselves over and over and over again. So eventually somebody's going to get bored with that and try to be original, but they're going to have to work within the restraints of that. And so they're going to start to come up with code. And that stuff's eventually going to be mutated out of the hands of the people, the petty bureaucrats, the petty power, the petty short-sighted seekers of power are eventually going to be eroded because they're not creative and they're kind of stupid. The system breeds stupidity. That's what we're witnessing. So yeah, anyways, was there any more questions? How long have I been? Oh, I'm almost at an hour. No one ever wonders how black folk feel. It's a problem. You go back and forth. I don't see any other of those delicious super chats. And it looks like you guys are just doing your thing, just chatting on the chat. The chatty chat's chatting. Chatty chat is chatting. So, what else do I have to say? I shouldn't butcher anymore. And you know what? The problem is that I don't know if it's necessarily a good business decision to publish any of the songs out there, but I guess, you know, you guys are supporting me by showing up, by watching me, by subscribing, liking, donating, buying me a coffee. The links will be in the description later on if you guys want to support me, to show you guys that I'm actually working on this, and I should probably put it behind a paywall, but I have a problem putting things behind a paywall. And so thank you very much for your support. Thank you very much for anybody who subscribes to my Patreon, who subscribes to YouTube, or any of the other ways that you can subscribe to me. And I sincerely ask for your forgiveness for not like bottling anything up just for you guys. I should do that more often and maybe do I did one kind of like round table, which is interesting because like the people who showed up to that round table of my supporters just kind of like, they controlled the thing, like they kind of took it over. I'm not really a good dynamic leader, but on that note, I will be in Ireland at the end of April. GenSpect, which is a collection of professionals who are trying to make a very rational, open, transgender, detrans, and parents of detrans, just like an open venue of not strictly affirmative care. They're trying to dilate that Overton window of the transgender professional the professional perspective on transgender medicine specifically. And they're going to have a conference in Killarney, Ireland. I think I can say the name of the city. It's going to be in Ireland. I'm going to be there for about a week. The conference is going to be about 4 days. I'm going to spend the whole time interviewing everybody's asses off. I'm headlining for some reason, which is so weird. I'm really touched that they think so highly of me. All I am is a guy with a camera that's just asking questions to people and listening to them. But they honor me deeply with wanting me out there, thinking that I'm important enough to headline. So I'll be out there, and then I'll be tooling around Ireland a little bit. It'll be great. And Work was kind enough to get to let me off for that time. So I'll be out there if anybody's interested in going. You can look it up. GenSpect, it is published, so you can attend if you want, if you're going to be in Ireland or if you want to make the trip. There's going to be a lot of excellent, wonderful people. Sasha's going to be there. Stella's going to be there. Angus Fox is going to be there. Alistair Gunn's going to be there. Joseph Burgo's going to be there. Just so many people. I can't even Shanae's going to be there. Richie's going to be there. Like, so many of the people that I've interviewed are going to be there. It's just going to be excellent to meet all these people in person. And if you want to meet them in person too, they are going to be there. Hell or high water. Don't bring any severed goat's heads. Thank you, Mira. Miroir, Jemu. Thank you for this super chat. So yeah, that was my once in a blue moon live stream. Hope you guys are doing well. I have nothing else to report, but GenSpect, Lomez is coming up soon. I have a bunch of other interviews in the works. Let me see if I want to talk about any of the interviews that I have coming up. To go to Denver next weekend. I have Lior Sapir. Kinsvater is returning with Leslie Elliott. I'm talking to somebody from Iceland. I'm talking to Poof, who's a shit poster on Twitter. She's going to be fun. She's a shit poster. I'm going to be meeting up with Exelansic in Tacoma on Saturday. And yeah, then I have a bunch of other people that I spoke with Alex Aheron of Gender Mapper today. That will be published in a few days. I spoke with Francis Widowson, who's another canceled Canadian professor. That one needs a little bit of editing because I just want to we spoke for about 3 hours. I want to kind of distill that down because we spoke about a number of different things. So I need to edit that a little bit more. And then yeah. So I'm gonna look at the chat. I'm gonna drink a couple sips. If anybody has any questions for me, I'll answer them from the chat. Does anyone enjoy being atomized and obsessed with efficiency and money? Asks Heather. Cyanide is being very honest. He doesn't give anybody anything aside from gracing them with my presence. Well, I'm extracting the distillate of your presence, which would be your attention, insofar as you signal your attention by tippy-typing it into the chat fields, which is where I know you from. Lori Dickinson says, I do disagree with Mr. Knowles. The tools James and yourself are using are more effective. Am I impatient at this point? Indeed, I am. So yeah, not necessarily expedient. Just sit down and just listen and talk and ask questions. Elise would love to sing in the musical. Love your live streams. Thank you. Eventually it'll get to the next level. I will need to actually, I'm going to need to find like a serious, I need to find a serious producer, to bring it to the next level. I'm almost to the place where it's more than a proof of concept. It's like, this thing is almost done. And then have somebody of a producer capacity to say, okay, we'll figure things out together. We'll map it out. We need this, and this, and this. So hopefully by the end of this year, that'll happen. But I'm so private. I'm such a loner. That's the other thing that I'm like, yeah, you Daily Wire guys, you do your guy thing with your big crew thing, and you just be your public persons. I'm going to be my private public person over here. That's what I'm going to like be as privately public as possible, or publicly private as possible. I don't know if Helen asked what beer I'm drinking. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about alcohol on stream, but it is a Big Ballard Imperial IPA. It's a Red Hook, which is I believe, yeah, they're in Ballard. I think they're a Washington brewery. No, Portsmouth. Yeah, so they have, Seattle, Washington, and Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Portland, Oregon, and Fairfield, California. So this one probably came from Seattle, Washington, or Portland, Oregon. I'm equidistant, basically. Them. Okay, the deconstruction. Rusty asked of Pines. The deconstruction of story is psychically catiotrophic for tribes of sense-making storytellers. I stand by that statement. This is Benjamin Boyce. I stand by that statement. Yeah. Okay. I think we're good. Tippy Tappy, you guys are great. Send your love to Ninja Kitty in the comments. I will consider publishing the Lomez thing either tomorrow or Saturday. If you guys have any questions, you want to contact me, my DMs are open on Twitter. That's the best way. My email's in the About page on YouTube. If you guys need to contact me, or if you want to set me up with somebody that you think I should interview, please. My requests are always open. I booked out. I booked out the next 2 weeks. This is so weird. I'm like flying. I'm like dangling over the abyss. Like my calendar is like, I don't know what's going to happen 2 weeks from now. I might just like not have any content. The content will dry up. It'll all be gone. Nobody will ever talk to me again. It's like, oh wait, no. There's millions of people who just want to talk. So my job is just to find them and to figure out how to get them to talk to other people in a way that's salient for other people. Yeah. There is a couple of interviews that I might publish for subscribers only, where I'm being interviewed, which are kind of more personal about my spiritual life, about my musical invention status. I don't really want the channel to be about me, but there are certain aspects of me that people who are like me enough to support me might find interesting or valuable. I was just interviewed about my spiritual life, which I kind of keep under wraps because it's kind of problematic to talk about spirituality on the internet, especially in my position, because that would be translating my privacy into the public domain. And there's this huge gap between my private personal experience, which is profoundly informative of me, and then my public persona, which is profoundly beneficial in another way. But to bridge those two or to wed those two, that's kind of problematic. And I don't think I'm ready to become somebody who is some sort of anything close at all to some sort of spiritual authority or guru. I'm much more comfortable being somebody who elicits that level of life from other people, or to elicit that indirect connection by being playful through curiosity and creativity. I'd rather elicit that than to directly explain it. To explicitize it, to take some sort of concretization of the divine and the spirit. So I'm fine with just like mouthing off about it here and there. But it's a huge part of my life. I mean, it's the core of my life, it's my spiritual life. Every time I stray from that, the further I get from that, the less of me I am. The further I get from my spiritual self, the less of me I am. That's just how I operate. But, saying that out loud on the public domain, and then you have to deal with people's theology and all the arguments about God. It's like, wait, you're going to argue about God? It's like either he's there or he's not. I say that too, but I still mock atheists and feminists in equal measure on Twitter. That's how weak I am. The spirit is noble, but the flesh is weak, or at least my... The snark is weak. The snarky nerve? What is it? The flesh is weak. Where does the snark come from? What is the body part responsible for snark? The spirit is willing. The spirit is noble. The spirit is transcendent. But the what is it? The snarkio pervardio? is ever engaged. Anyway, so I should let you guys go. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to tune out and go make some pasta. Take care. And I'm going to press a button. So.